Hello bookbinders, it's Thursday, December 9th, and this week I read Strangers by Graham Robb. So the full title of this book is Strangers, Homosexual Love in the 19th Century, and it's all about gay culture in the Victorian era, basically, and it focuses mainly on Europe. It talks a little bit about America, and it also talks in terms of time all the way up into the 20th century, but focuses primarily on European Victorian era. And it's really interesting. I really like this writer. It's a nonfiction book, but he has a very literary sensibility with his writing. You get a lot of sort of authorly phrases. So even though it's nonfiction and those books are usually really dry, it's actually a really easy read because the way he says things are interesting. I was reading this book while Tumblr was down this week. You all remember. It was a traumatizing 36 hours. And I was at work, and it was a really slow day at work, and I killed my cell phone by 7 o'clock. And, so a lot of this was happening, and I couldn't tweet about it or anything. So when you look through it, I have all of these, notes on the side, because I couldn't talk to anybody about it, so I have little commentary running along the side of the book, because some things, the first part of this book is all about the medical and psychological viewpoint at this point in time. Because this is the era of Freud. It's when psychology first became a thing. So it's really the first time where you have a lot of written records about the subject. I mean, far less written records than about a less taboo topic, but homosexuals in this era were used as guinea pigs in a lot of ways. So they would try things out on them that they wouldn't try out on other patients. So there is a lot of scientific documentation at this point. And it was illegal back then to be gay, so you have legal records. The problem with that is that you end up with only a picture of crazy people or criminals. And that's what a lot of psychology was in the beginning. When psychology first came about, Freud and all of those people only studied sick people, so they would only study people in mental hospitals or criminals or people with a history of mental illnesses. So, which is why early psychological texts, you have kind of a screwed up image of how the world works. And it kind of explains why Freud thinks everyone's so weird. And it was the same thing with gay people. And because the only gay people they were looking at were criminals or insane, it actually is what led to the classification of homosexuality as a mental illness, is because the only people that they were hearing from were people that already had mental illnesses. So the obvious connection there was that one led to the other, as opposed to being a otherwise naturally occurring thing. It's sort of interesting as the book progresses. There was a study done in the early 1900s that found that sexual aberrations, so kinks or alternative sexual preferences, that sort of thing, occur more often in sane people than they do in crazy people. So that was interesting to me. And there were parts in this book that made me laugh out loud, not because the author was telling a joke, but because the actual truth of the situation was so hilarious. Like some of the old cures they used to have for homosexuality in the 19th century, one of them was solving math equations. And I can see how they could think that was a fairly suitable treatment, because there are a lot of things that I would do to not have to do math equations anymore. So that's effective. Other things they recommended: lukewarm sponge baths. Cold showers, of course, were popular. They would also recommend for gay men to marry a girl that looked like a boy and try to trick themselves into being straight again. That didn't really work out. But what I found most interesting about this book was, one, how much things have changed, but also how very much the same our discourse around the subject of homosexuality is to how it was back then, is that, 1891 was when we first had someone suggest that that homosexuality was a naturally occurring event, whether it be genetic or however else one would define natural. And then you also have other people saying that, it's a sin, it's an aberration, it's not natural, it's a mental malfunction, or like Freud says that it came from having a neglectful father and an overbearing mother. And those ideas are still around now and very prevalent now. In fact, our arguments about the topic are identical to how they were then. And people's attitudes were the same. Like, a lot of people didn't care. They're like, Bob and Joe are shacking up over there. Whatever. And then there were a lot of people that were just outraged and on a mission against it. And then a lot of the people that were the biggest protesters were, as it turns out, gay themselves. Haven't seen that happen before. So it just struck me when I was reading it, and the things that they were saying in the late 1800s are identical to the conversations that we have about the subject now. What was also interesting is how much less oppressive society was than how we think of it. So, at the time, it was illegal to be gay, and in some places you could still get the death penalty for it. Most places you just went to jail or had to do hard labor. And while that existed, they weren't really laws against being gay. They were laws against specific actions that included the gay community in it. So you get the picture, reading of how things actually happen, is that it wasn't that big of a deal back then. I mean, it was still, I'm not saying it was all sunshine and rainbows, because it wasn't, but it wasn't nearly as oppressive as we think of it being. However, in the 30s through the 60s is when things got horrific. When they would give gay people radiation, like as if gay is a cancer and you can just radiate out of them, and that obviously, failed. Electroshock therapy, which some people still use. It's against the rules now, but it still happens. And that's also when the social attitude became a lot stricter about it. It was a lot harder to live your life as a gay person. So that was really the dark ages in terms of the gay community, even though we think like the further back you go, the harder it would be. But it really wasn't. It was more the mid-20th century that things got really kind of scary for a little while. And so now we're coming back around to having the same attitudes that we did in the 1800s. Progress. So that was my book for this week, Strangers by Graham Robb. I would definitely recommend it. Absolutely. Whoever you are, I think this is a book that you can appreciate. It gives you a new perspective on a time that we think we already know very well. So, highly recommend it. The one thing I did find irritating is that he kept quoting things in French and German without giving a translation anywhere, and I, for one, don't speak French or German, so I found that a little irritating. But you know what? The Sherlock Holmes books, they do the same things. What is it, Europeans? Dan, do you do this? Do you go around quoting things in French and German and just be like, oh, of course they know French and German? Because I don't. And I don't think most Americans do. In fact, I don't think most people do. So that was my one complaint about it. I don't think that I have any questions to answer this week, except for the book Santa trade-off that we're doing. And I have Sarah. And Sarah, I know what kind of books you like, and I also know books that would fit into that category, but I think they're ones that you've already read, because they're kind of the ones that everyone's already read. So I'm just going to suggest for you one of my favorite books, and that is How We Are Hungry by Dave Eggers. I'll put the title and author down in the bookshelf. And it's a fairly short book. It's a collection of short stories. It's one of my favorite books of all time. So yes, How We Are Hungry by Dave Eggers. Next week, I will be reading whatever book that was Dan wanted me to read, but you're gonna need to type that out for me, Dan, because I would not even begin to know how to spell that, and I kind of need that if I'm gonna be looking it up and Googling it and being able to actually say what it was. All right, so that's all I got. Julia, I will see you tomorrow.